first episode of Reaping Equity. My name is Aria Stuhmer, and I'm here with history teacher Ms. Schiraldi to discuss the growing problems of homelessness and poverty in the United States. So, what do you think about how the pandemic has affected poor and homeless people in the United States?
I think it has had a huge effect on the poor and homeless people in the United States. I think that more people became homeless during the pandemic. Although there were some things put in place for such as rents, landlords could not evict anyone during the pandemic. However, I still think that people struggled paying their bills because they lost their jobs.
Yeah.
So I think it had a huge effect on homelessness, especially in certain states. The states that are warmer, like California, for example, there's homeless communities that it's been unprecedented.
Yeah, definitely. I actually did research, and it said the unemployment rate at the start of the pandemic has skyrocketed because many people took cut to their paychecks because of the pandemic. According to a research done by Pew Research Center, 60% of working adults experienced a cut in their paychecks due to the pandemic, and now many jobs in the service industry remain vacant because employers are they can't properly pay their employees.
Because they're struggling.
Yeah.
Okay.
What government policies were in effect during the pandemic to help poor and homeless people?
Well, what I know of is what I just stated, is I know there was a hold in the state of New Jersey, at least, where landlords could not evict. I'm not sure if that went from state to state, but I know in New Jersey, the Governor Murphy put into place that you could not evict if someone could not pay their rent because of something COVID related. So I'm not really sure about other states, but I think that was helpful, but not really an answer.
Yeah.
To the poor and the homeless people that were already homeless.
Yeah.
In our state. I don't really know what else he has in place for homeless people.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that they have to do something as the winter comes upon us.
Yeah.
Especially in our area, New York, New Jersey, the homeless population is more, and it will be getting cold. So people are going to there's going to be more people that are going to have issues.
Yeah, of course. There's going to be people who aren't going to have shelter that need it.
Correct.
And do you think that there's anything that police officers can do to aid homeless people?
I think they do the best that they can by bringing them to shelters. Sometimes the homeless people do not want to go to shelters. That becomes challenging for the police officers. But you always hear about the goodwill of some of these police officers, either buying shoes for homeless people or, giving them a ride somewhere or whatever. Any little bit helps. But I think their hands are a bit tied if the person doesn't want to go to a shelter.
Definitely.
I know they sometimes do force them, but I don't think that that's the right thing to do either.
Yeah.
But it is for their own safety because as the winter becomes upon us, it will get more and more difficult for homeless people.
Yeah, speaking about not being able to force them, I definitely feel like a lot of what police are able to do, they do what they can.
Sure.
Because obviously people have free will and you can't physically force someone to go to a shelter if they don't want to. But I did do research about certain police officers who may target poorer communities that are impoverished. And I did research, and it said that police officers are more likely to find issues in poor neighborhoods, such as jaywalking or just giving tickets to people. And because you're targeting poor neighborhoods, they're not able to pay these tickets because it's 60% of their wages are having to go towards all of these police tickets that they just aren't able to pay off because they have rent and food costs to worry about.
So then I think the issue there is that Our police departments need to re-educate police officers on not to focus on certain areas just because they're urban, to be there for the right reasons and not give people tickets just to give people tickets.
Yeah.
I think that would stem from education.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Police reform is a thing, and I just mean by reform, I don't mean to cut wages or cut anything. I just mean re-educate.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that needs to be done for the police departments, at least nowadays, because there are issues that have been noticed and brought up to people's attention, especially recently with the pandemic.
Correct.
And I feel like if they are able to re-educate their officers, I feel like a lot of our issues or some of our issues could be solved. And I think that's like something that's really important right now.
It's very important, and I agree with you 100%. I agree education is the answer.
Yeah. What do you think community members can do to like help homeless people as well?
Well, I know there are missionary people that do missionary work to help like homeless people and people in poor areas to either help with reconstructing their homes. I know the Catholic Church is very active in that.
Yeah.
And I support that. Like, I'm a Catholic, but I bring, like, they always are collecting food for their food banks. And even during the pandemic, I think one of the only places that was left open was the Catholic food banks. And, to keep that going, whether you're Catholic or not, I think is really important because there was so many more people that could not eat because of the pandemic. So I think we have to continue work. I think, again, my daughter went to Catholic school. They do a lot of missionary work. So I think that should probably stem over to some public schools.
Yeah.
I think that there should be some form of, charity work as part of like your graduation.
Yeah.
I know you have to do community service, but that should all be a part of it. So maybe, working at a food bank or just to show students how the other half lives.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of some issues that come from like high schoolers graduating is they are uneducated about how people that are poor live. So I think they lack empathy towards what they go through and what they experience. And I think that's a really big problem in America is the lack of empathy that exists, especially in younger generations, because some of us are so privileged that we just like don't see the issues that exist in our country. And I think that's a big problem.
I agree with that. And that's why I think it should be part of our high schools.
Yeah.
That it may become a requirement for students to do some form of charity work.
Yeah.
In some capacity that would open their eyes, I think, to a lot of things and how they live their life.
Yeah. Why do you think homeless people, some of them are reluctant to stay in shelters?
I think it's dangerous.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of crime. I think there's a huge amount of mental illness in our homeless population. So either the people that are not willing to go to these shelters are either, have mental issues, or the people that are there have mental issues, so it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
And I can totally understand that because, you're sleeping amongst like 100 people and you have no idea who's with you in that room. Like it could be someone that has, some form of mental illness. They could have a weapon. There's a million reasons why. I completely understand why homeless people do not want to stay in shelters.
Yeah. I think it's also kind of sad that there aren't help that's aided towards homeless people who have mental illness, because I mean, personally, I'm a big advocate for people having like free healthcare and help to get therapy or whatever you need when it comes to that, because I think mental health is like such an aspect of living that's overlooked for a lot of people, and especially in the homeless population, because a lot of them do have mental issues that they aren't able to get the help that they need because they're so poor.
I agree. I totally agree. And also, they are not getting the help that they need because they've closed a lot of institutions.
Yeah.
There was like, this is way before your time,
Yeah.
but I'm going to talk about like there were actually psychiatrists on staff in some mental institutions, and it was all closed down because of some obviously inappropriate things that were happening in them. And instead of like trying to fix the problems there, they just ended up closing them down. So it became all about money, which is really sad.
Yeah.
And I think that has affected our mental health as a whole, as a country.
Definitely.
It's much more difficult to, and especially during COVID, like it's much more difficult to find a physician and a psychiatrist, and even getting a therapist is difficult.
Yeah.
So I think since that went on with institutions closing down, our mental health in the country has suffered.
Yeah, I agree with that. Minimum wage in New Jersey is currently $12 per hour. Do you think that's like enough to support the cost of living?
Absolutely not in this state. And it's concerning to me because although Governor Murphy, I do know, has a plan that it's going to go up to $15 by 2024, what are people supposed to do in the meantime between 2021 and 2024 if you're making minimum wage? Minimum wage in this state, I do not think you can live you're in a poverty. You're in a poverty situation if you're living in New Jersey and making minimum wage.
Yeah.
So that needs to change.
Yeah. I mean, my mom, she's a healthcare worker and she only makes $20 per hour. And I mean, sure, that's a lot compared to the $12 an hour. But even that, the place that we're living, it's still difficult to come by enough money to adequately pay for the things that we need as a family. So like minimum wage in this state at least is a huge issue because you have a lot of families that live in this state. It's like a lot of people come here to live with their families. So to have minimum wage be so low is not right, and it's not fair to the people who have to support their families.
I agree.
Also, the highest minimum wage in the state of California is only $14 per hour. And as you said before in the beginning, homeless rates in California are so high, which I feel like also just goes to show you that even $14, $2 higher than what we have in this state is still not enough. And I think that goes back to the cost of living in places like California and in places like New Jersey, because it's very expensive to live, especially in California, because it's such like a city kind of area. So I think that that's also part of the reason why there's so many homeless people who live in California.
I think also weather has a lot to do with the homeless people living in California all year round.
Yeah.
But in areas that have such a high living expenses they need to figure out another way for people to either make higher than minimum wage, even in low paying jobs, because you just cannot make ends meet. You are in poverty if you are making $12 an hour and living in the state of New Jersey, or $14 an hour and living in the state of California. So maybe some federal government could be distributed for something like that.
Yeah. What do you think enough money for minimum wage would be?
I don't think even $15 will cut it.
Yeah.
I mean, you just stress how your mom's making $20 an hour and still having difficulty making it.
Yeah.
So either the cost of living has to be better in the state, or it has to go up substantially.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you could lower the cost of living in the state of New Jersey because of taxes and things like that. But it would definitely have to be, higher than $20 an hour, because, if you're having problems making ends meet as a family, how everyone else is having problems making ends meet as a family. So minimal, it has to be over $20 then.
Yeah. Also, do you think there's any other factors contributing to homelessness and poverty that you would like to discuss?
Well, other than COVID, I think that was huge issue with homelessness. I don't think our country does enough for the homeless people even before COVID began.
Yeah.
I think that we might need some more federal help in each state for homelessness. But I think that it's the unemployment rate had a lot to do with it. And then when COVID hit, unemployment rate went up. So of course the homelessness went up. I just think that each state running their own is not really working. I think some federal funding might be needed for the states that are having the biggest problems, such as California. Actually, California has, I believe, the most homeless in all the country.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that's because of weather. They get to live there all year round and they don't freeze to death like they would here. But I just think that our federal government might need to step in and help in some better ways than what they've been doing.
Yeah. I also think gentrification is a huge issue as well, especially in cities like New York. And that's such a huge city. And a lot of homeless people do also live in New York. And gentrification pushes out all of these people who are relying on these poor communities to be able to pay their rent. And I think if you're making communities or improving them, then you're pushing out all of these poor people because, of course, with improvements comes higher rent. And if you're poor, you can't afford that cost of rent.
Well, that's exactly what happened. And I, again, have lived long enough to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember years ago, a place like Hoboken was not really a great place to live.
Yeah.
But then all the young, wealthier people, they called them yuppies back then, came in and bought up a lot of the properties. And that pushed out it was an urban area, it pushed out all the poorer people, just like what you said. And all it did was really open up for more wealthier people. It didn't help the poor at all. And it seems like there's a lot of towns throughout that area that seemed to have happened with that. I can name a couple more that are very close to Hoboken that did the same thing. People, because it was so close to New York, wealthier people couldn't afford New York, so they started living in Hoboken.
Mm-hmm.
But it only ended up pushing out. That wasn't the right answer, I don't think, because it only helped push out the poorer people.
Mm-hmm.
By having wealthier people move in.
Thank you, Ms. Schiraldi, for joining me today for a conversation on this important and timely topic, and thank you to our listeners for tuning into the first episode of Reaping Equity. Until next month, this is Aria Stuhmer signing off.